Ethan had never imagined that a mission meant to observe alien defenses would change his life forever. He stood on the edge of the reconnaissance shuttle, staring at the sprawling alien capital below. Towering crystal spires shimmered under the light of the nearby star, and vehicles moved along translucent skyways like rivers of light. The planet was alive, sophisticated, and dangerous. Humanity had only just begun contact, and Ethan's team had been tasked with gathering intelligence on the alien race known as the Illyrians. He tightened his gloves and checked his equipment one last time. His heart pounded, not from fear but from the anticipation of what lay ahead. Humans had learned to fight in countless ways, but facing an advanced alien civilization required patience, observation, and careful calculation. His team had practiced for months for situations exactly like this, yet none of their training had prepared them for what came next. The calm observation mission turned into chaos in a heartbeat. Without warning, a fleet of enemy ships emerged from the planet's atmosphere, moving with precision that immediately put Ethan on high alert. He saw massive energy beams cutting through the air, and smaller craft swooped down, attacking the city below. Sirens blared inside the shuttle as his team scrambled to respond. "Contact! Enemy fleet approaching the capital!" shouted their commander. Ethan's fingers tightened around his weapon as the shuttle jolted from near-miss blasts. Through the viewport, he could see explosions tearing through the crystal spires, sending shards scattering like glowing snow. Panic began to spread among the civilians below, and the military forces of the planet were already engaged, desperately trying to hold the attackers at bay. In the chaos, a communication signal crackled in his ear. "Team focus! Evacuate civilians, find strategic points, and report everything." Ethan's eyes scanned the destruction until a flash of movement caught his attention. Among the fleeing crowds, he saw a figure trapped under rubble near one of the spires. A human would never have been able to endure that weight, but he recognized the Illyrian form immediately. It was the princess. She wore the traditional ceremonial garb of her people, adorned with shimmering patterns that reflected the city lights even in this chaos. Her eyes, wide with fear, met his. Without hesitation, Ethan leaped from the shuttle, using a grappling line to descend safely to the ground. Every instinct told him this was dangerous, but something stronger propelled him forward, the human instinct to protect the innocent. When he reached the princess, debris pinned her down and smoke from nearby explosions made the air hard to breathe. Ethan knelt beside her, assessing the situation quickly. His hands moved with precision, lifting heavy pieces of crystal and metal while she struggled weakly, unable to free herself. The enemy troops were approaching rapidly, their weapons glowing with lethal energy. Ethan's training took over. He grabbed his compact energy rifle and fired with accuracy he did not know he possessed. One by one, attackers fell back or retreated, giving him just enough time to drag the princess out of the immediate danger zone. His muscles burned and his armor was scratched and dented, but he did not stop. Finally, they reached a small ruined building that provided some cover. Ethan checked the princess's condition. She was breathing but faint, and her chest showed shallow, uneven movements. Her pulse was weak and her body trembled from shock. He knew instinctively that she might not survive without urgent intervention. He hesitated only for a moment. The rare compatibility between human and Illyrian biology was known, but little tested. It was dangerous, and no human had ever attempted a direct blood transfusion with an Illyrian. But looking into her eyes, Ethan made his decision. Without another thought, he retrieved a portable transfusion kit from his pack and prepared himself. "I need to do this," he murmured softly, almost to himself. The princess looked at him with confusion and fear, but she did not resist. Perhaps she understood that this human had already risked everything to save her life. The transfusion began, and Ethan felt a strange connection as their life forces mingled. Pain shot through his body as he gave as much blood as he safely could, but he refused to stop until he was certain she had a chance to survive. Each drop felt like a pledge, a promise that he would not let her die while he could still act. Minutes passed, though they felt like hours. The sound of distant explosions continued, but in that ruined building, time seemed to slow. Finally, the princess's breathing steadied, and color returned to her face. Ethan collapsed beside her, exhausted and bleeding, but a sense of relief washed over him. She was alive, and that was all that mattered. As they lay there, weak but alive, the surrounding Illyrians began to emerge from hiding. Guards, soldiers, and civilians watched silently. Whispers began to spread. They had never seen a human act with such courage, Such disregard for personal safety, or such loyalty to another being. Rumors traveled quickly, reaching the ears of the Queen Ardessa, a ruler known for her strict standards and unwavering expectations. Ardessa did not act immediately. She was a woman who observed before making decisions, a leader who measured each action and its consequences. When she finally summoned Ethan to the palace, he was uncertain of what awaited him. He had saved her daughter, yet he had no idea if this would earn her gratitude or suspicion. The palace was a marvel, more splendid than anything he had ever seen. The walls glowed with soft light and the air hummed with energy from unseen sources. As he entered the grand hall, he felt hundreds of eyes on him, analyzing, judging, and wondering. The queen herself sat on an elevated throne, her presence commanding and intimidating. Her gaze fell on him, sharp and curious, as if she could see the courage and fear intertwined within him. "Human," she said, her voice calm but firm, echoing in the hall. "You risked your life to save my daughter. Explain why." Ethan stood tall despite the pain in his body. He spoke simply and honestly, knowing that deception would be pointless. "Because she was in danger. Because I could help. That is all." A ripple of surprise moved through the court. Some muttered that humans were reckless, others that they were foolish. But the queen said nothing. She studied him, her eyes narrowing and widening as if weighing the value of his life against the value of his actions. Finally, she made her decision. "You will not leave this palace. You will remain here under my watch until I determine your loyalty." Ethan's heart sank slightly. He had hoped for freedom, perhaps gratitude, but now he understood that the queen's judgment was not cruel. It was her way of protecting her family and her people. He had saved the princess, but in doing so he had bound himself to an alien ruler whose expectations were as high as the stars above. The Princess Lyria had recovered enough to stand beside him. She looked at Ethan with something more than gratitude, respect, trust, and perhaps the beginnings of something deeper. Yet for now she remained silent, knowing that the politics of her world were far more complicated than she could explain. As the days passed, Ethan learned the strict rules of the palace. Guards followed him, advisors questioned him, and every movement he made was observed. Yet through it all he remained focused on one thing: protecting the princess and proving that humans were not weak. That courage could come from the smallest among them, and that one life could make a difference in a galaxy full of uncertainty. Even in confinement, Ethan's spirit was unbroken. Every day was a new challenge, every task a test of his abilities. Yet he faced each obstacle with determination, knowing that saving Lyria had set in motion events far greater than he could have imagined. He had given his blood, risked his life, and in return, he had earned not freedom, but a purpose that would shape not just his destiny, but the destiny of the alien capital itself. And so, in the quiet moments of the palace, when he looked at the recovering princess and felt the weight of his own sacrifice, Ethan understood something profound. Humanity's strength was not in their technology, not in their numbers, but in their courage, their willingness to act when others hesitated, and their ability to give everything, even their own blood, for the sake of another. For the first time, he realized that being human in a galaxy of powerful alien races was not a weakness. It was a power that could not be measured, only witnessed. Ethan had never imagined that saving a life could lead to captivity, but the palace soon made him understand the complexities of the Illyrian world. The queen had allowed him to live, but he was not free. Guards shadowed his every move, and advisors scrutinized his actions, whispering in corners as he passed. Every glance from the queen carried a mix of curiosity, suspicion, and silent judgment. The first day in the palace was disorienting. Ethan had grown up in human cities with familiar streets and ordinary laws, but this world was different. Every surface glimmered with technology that seemed alive. Doors opened without hands, floors shifted to guide travelers, and energy flowed through the walls like invisible rivers. Despite the wonder, Ethan did not allow himself to be distracted. His mind remained focused on the Princess Lyria, whose recovery he felt partly responsible for. Lyria, still weak from her injuries, moved cautiously through the palace. Ethan noticed that she did not speak much, perhaps out of fear, perhaps out of respect. She followed him silently during training and observation, her eyes filled with a quiet intensity. Though he had saved her life, he began to realize that the princess was more than royalty. She was clever, resilient, and curious about humans. Ethan's first challenge was not physical, but political. The Queen summoned him to a private audience. The grand hall was vast and silent, except for the hum of energy flowing through the walls. Ardessa the Queen sat on her throne, her posture regal, her expression unreadable. "You have saved my daughter," she said, her voice calm but sharp, echoing in the hall. "But a life given does not guarantee trust. Why should I allow a human to remain in my palace? Your presence is both a risk and a fascination." Ethan straightened, ignoring the lingering pain from his injuries. "I acted because it was right. I do not seek reward. I only want to protect her and do what I can to help." The Queen's eyes narrowed. Some might have mistaken it for anger, but Ethan sensed something more complex. She was analyzing him, measuring the sincerity behind his words. "Many humans act for reward or for glory," she said. "You act without selfish intent. You are different. That is what troubles me most." Ethan held her gaze without flinching. "I understand. But if my actions prove loyalty, then there is nothing more I can offer except my honesty and effort." The Queen rose from her throne, moving closer. Her presence was overwhelming, like standing near a sun. "Loyalty is not easily earned," she said. "You will remain in the palace. You will be observed, tested, and challenged. Your every action will be noted. Only then will I determine your fate." Ethan bowed his head respectfully. He understood that this was not punishment, not entirely. It was a challenge, and challenges suited humans. He had been tested before, and each time he had risen stronger. The following days were a mixture of training, observation, and subtle tests. The palace guards led him through simulations that tested his reflexes, strategy, and endurance. He moved through hallways filled with shifting obstacles, faced holographic attackers, and solved puzzles designed to challenge both mind and body. Every test pushed him to his limits, and he often collapsed from exhaustion. Yet each time he rose again. Lyria began to follow his progress closely. From a distance, she observed how he adapted to challenges, how he treated the palace staff with respect, and how he maintained composure even under pressure. She had never met a human who showed such resilience and thoughtfulness. Slowly, her fear of the outsider began to transform into admiration. Advisors, however, remained skeptical. They whispered that humans were unpredictable, their courage often bordering on recklessness. Some suggested keeping Ethan confined to a secure area, away from the princess. Others argued that his actions during the battle had saved the city, and that his potential could not be ignored. The Queen listened quietly to every opinion, but did not immediately act on any. One evening, Ethan found himself alone in a quiet garden, a place where the palace walls glowed softly with energy. He tended to his wounds, which had not fully healed, and reflected on his situation. He realized that though he had saved Lyria's life, he was now bound by the Queen's judgment. Yet he did not regret his choice. Humanity's strength was in courage, and he had proven it in the face of overwhelming odds. His reflection was interrupted by a soft voice. "You think too much for someone in my world," Lyria said, stepping into the garden. She moved carefully, her own injuries still evident. "Most people here judge by position, not by heart. You are different." Ethan looked at her, surprised by the honesty in her words. "I do not act to be different. I act because it is right." She smiled faintly, a mixture of gratitude and amusement. "Humans are strange. You do not seek reward, yet your actions are more powerful than those of the strongest Illyrians." They walked together through the glowing pathways, sharing stories of Earth and of her world. Ethan spoke of human cities, of mountains, rivers, and ordinary struggles that felt monumental in the face of the alien city's grandeur. Lyria told him about the Illyrian court, their customs, and the weight of responsibility she carried as a princess. Though different, they found common ground in courage, resilience, and the desire to protect others. Not everyone in the palace was pleased with their growing bond. Certain advisors whispered that the princess's attention could be dangerous, that the human might influence her decisions in unpredictable ways. Others feared that Ethan's presence was a challenge to their authority, that the Queen's trust in him might weaken their own control. Tension grew quietly, like a storm forming on the horizon. Ethan, however, remained focused. He trained rigorously, learning not just combat skills but also the ways of the palace. He observed carefully, understanding the politics, the hidden signals, and the subtle movements that carried meaning in Illyrian culture. He knew that one mistake could endanger not only himself, but the princess as well. One morning, the queen summoned him to witness a council meeting. Advisors argued passionately over the defense strategies of the capital, the deployment of troops, and the intelligence gathered from human sources. Ethan remained silent, listening intently. When asked for his opinion, he spoke clearly and concisely, offering solutions based on logic, observation, and human ingenuity. The council was initially skeptical, but his suggestions proved practical and effective. Ardessa's gaze lingered on him longer than anyone else's. She recognized the qualities she valued most in leaders and warriors, judgment guided by courage and reason. Yet she did not reward him with freedom. Instead, she reminded him of his duty to remain bound to the palace, as much a protector as a guest. As the weeks passed, small threats tested Ethan's abilities further. Minor sabotage attempts, intelligence puzzles, and defensive drills kept him constantly alert. Each success built his reputation within the palace. Guards began to respect him, staff began to trust him, and even skeptical advisors could not deny his value. Lyria's recovery continued, and she started to spend more time with Ethan, observing his methods and learning from his strategies. Their conversations moved beyond the basics of survival and tactics. They discussed philosophy, leadership, and the meaning of courage. Ethan discovered that even in a galaxy filled with advanced technology and powerful beings, the essence of strength remained the same: heart, intelligence, and the willingness to act for others. One evening, as the twin moons of the planet rose, casting silver light across the palace gardens, Ethan and Lyria sat quietly, sharing a rare moment of peace. The city hummed below them, but for a brief moment the chaos of war, politics, and duty seemed distant. "You have changed how I see humans," Lyria said softly. "Most Illyrians fear them, dismiss them, or underestimate them. You are different." Ethan smiled faintly. "I am not different because I am human. I am different because I choose to act, even when the odds are against me." She nodded, understanding more than words could express. "I hope the queen sees that soon." Ethan looked toward the palace, where Ardessa's silhouette remained visible through the grand windows. The queen's judgment was still unspoken, her final decision yet to come. Ethan knew he was still bound, but he no longer felt like a prisoner. Every challenge, every test, every observation was an opportunity to prove that humanity's courage could stand among the stars. As the night deepened, Ethan prepared for the next day. More tests, more challenges, and perhaps more danger awaited him. Yet he felt ready. He had saved a princess with his own blood, survived alien politics, and earned the quiet respect of those around him. Bound he might be, but free in courage, heart, and determination he already was. And so, Ethan faced the coming days with resolve. He did not know what the queen's final decision would be, nor what dangers lay ahead, but he understood one undeniable truth. Humanity's power was not measured by strength or technology, but by the courage to act, the willingness to sacrifice, and the determination to protect life, even when the universe seemed set against it. Ethan had grown accustomed to the rhythms of palace life, though accustomed did not mean comfortable. Each day brought new lessons, new tests, and new reminders that he was a human, living in a world far beyond the boundaries of his own. The Illyrians were unlike anything he had seen, towering, graceful, and supremely disciplined, but their brilliance did not intimidate him. Instead, it inspired him. Every challenge was an opportunity to prove that courage and intelligence were not limited to any single species. He began the day with training. The palace guards had devised a rigorous regimen for him, combining physical endurance, combat skill, and tactical reasoning. Ethan moved through obstacle courses filled with shifting floors, laser grids, and moving platforms. His muscles ached and sweat clung to his armor, but he pressed on. Every movement had to be precise. Every decision carried consequences. A single mistake could injure him or worse, cause harm to others. The princess often observed him during these sessions. Lyria's presence was quiet but intense. She did not interfere, but Ethan felt her gaze, a constant reminder that the actions of humans could ripple far beyond their own kind. It was not just about survival anymore. It was about trust, respect, and the subtle ways that one life could influence an entire court. After training, he was often called to observe palace operations. Advisors discussed strategies for city defense, trade negotiations, and the ever-present threat of enemies. Ethan listened attentively, asking questions and occasionally offering suggestions. At first, his ideas were met with skepticism. How could a human understand the complexities of Illyrian politics? Yet when his suggestions were practical and effective, they were quietly noted. A few advisors began to murmur among themselves, acknowledging that perhaps humans were more capable than their preconceptions allowed. Despite his growing recognition, Ethan remained bound to the palace. The Queen's decree was clear. He was to remain under her observation, neither free to leave nor allowed full privileges. Guards followed him wherever he went, and his every action was recorded by invisible sensors embedded in the walls. Some humans might have found this stifling, but Ethan adapted. He understood that freedom was earned, not given, and that his actions now mattered not just for himself, but for the princess and the city he had helped save. One afternoon, the Queen summoned him again. The grand hall was quieter than usual, the lights soft and almost ethereal. Ardessa regarded him with the same sharp intensity she always carried. "You have performed well in your tasks," she said. "Yet performance alone does not prove loyalty. Many humans act bravely when they are watched. You must demonstrate consistency, judgment, and the ability to act under pressure. That is the next test." Ethan nodded. He did not need to ask what the test entailed. The Queen did not always explain her expectations in detail. Observation was itself a test, and understanding unspoken rules was essential to survival in this world. Over the following days, the palace seemed calm, almost serene. But Ethan sensed tension beneath the surface. Some advisors spoke in hushed tones, glancing at him when they thought he was not paying attention. Guards whispered about unusual movements in the city. Even Lyria seemed more serious. Her usual quiet curiosity now mingled with concern. The first indication of danger came during a routine patrol. Ethan was accompanying a squad of palace guards through the outer corridors when a sudden explosion shook the hallway. Smoke and debris filled the air, and the sound of alarm bells rang through the palace. He dropped to the floor instinctively, scanning for threats. A small group of intruders had breached the outer defenses. They were fast, precise, and clearly trained in palace combat. Ethan did not hesitate. He leaped into action, using both his human instincts and the combat techniques he had learned from the Illyrians. He deflected energy blasts, used walls for leverage, and disarmed 2 intruders with precise strikes. The guards were skilled, but they hesitated against the intruders' unfamiliar tactics. Ethan moved among them, coordinating their defense, positioning them strategically, and taking calculated risks to protect both the palace and the staff. Even though he was unarmed at times, his presence inspired others to act with clarity and courage. Finally, the intruders were pushed back and contained. But the attack revealed a troubling truth. Someone within the palace had assisted them. The thought chilled Ethan. Betrayal among those sworn to protect the Queen was more dangerous than any outside attack. The Queen arrived soon after the incident, her expression as composed as ever, but her eyes betrayed a flicker of concern. She observed Ethan's handling of the situation silently, noting his decisiveness, his calm under pressure, and his unwavering focus. Though she had not spoken a word during the crisis, her observation carried weight far heavier than praise. "You acted well," she said later, once the immediate threat was contained. "But threats are not always visible, and enemies often wear familiar faces. You must remain vigilant. Your judgment will continue to be tested." Ethan understood. His role in the palace was evolving. He was no longer merely a guest or a captive. He was becoming a defender, a protector, and someone whose decisions could influence the lives of many. The weight of this responsibility did not intimidate him. It strengthened his resolve. Lyria watched him from a distance as he recovered from the skirmish. Her admiration for the human warrior grew with each passing day. She began to ask questions not just about combat, but about humanity, ethics, and choices. Ethan spoke honestly, sharing stories of human history, of battles fought for principles rather than victory, of sacrifices made for others. She listened intently, absorbing each word, realizing that bravery was not measured by size or power, but by heart. The palace, however, was far from safe. The Queen's advisors remained wary, some quietly plotting to remove the human influence they deemed dangerous. Rumors of his growing favor with the princess reached their ears, and whispers of jealousy and suspicion began to circulate. Ethan, ever observant, noticed the subtle glances, the half-hidden conversations, and the cautious movements of those who viewed him as a threat. One evening, as the twin moons of the planet rose high, Ethan was called to a private audience with the Queen. The grand hall was silent except for the soft hum of energy flowing through the walls. Ardessa regarded him with her usual intensity. "You have proven capable under pressure," she said. "Yet the palace is a web of influence and deceit. Strength alone does not ensure survival here. You must demonstrate loyalty not only to me, but to the people you protect. Soon you will face a trial designed to measure both your courage and your wisdom." Ethan nodded. He did not know the details of the trial, but he had learned enough to understand that it would be demanding, perhaps even dangerous. The Queen did not design tests for convenience. They were meant to reveal character. In the following days, Ethan continued his training, but he also began learning the subtleties of palace life. He observed the hierarchy, noted alliances and rivalries, and studied the behavior of those around him. Every conversation, every glance, and every gesture became a source of information. He realized that survival in this world required more than strength. It required understanding, patience, and the ability to anticipate the actions of others. Lyria, too, grew bolder. She began to speak more freely with him, asking about his thoughts on strategy, leadership, and even justice. Their conversations deepened, forming a bond rooted in mutual respect and shared experience. She admired his ability to remain calm, to act decisively, and to think beyond immediate danger. Ethan, in turn, admired her intelligence, her curiosity, and the quiet strength she displayed even in moments of vulnerability. Then, one morning, the palace faced another test, though it was not immediately clear. A group of palace staff reported unusual activity in the lower corridors. Ethan was sent to investigate, accompanied by a small team of guards. As they moved through the dimly lit halls, he sensed tension, a quiet but persistent indication that something was amiss. Suddenly, a hidden door slid open, revealing a group of armed intruders. They were not invaders from outside. They were members of the palace itself, attempting a covert attack to undermine the Queen's authority. Ethan acted instantly. He directed the guards, formed defensive positions, and engaged the intruders with both strategy and courage. The skirmish was intense. Ethan was outnumbered, and several blows struck him, leaving bruises and fresh cuts. Yet he continued, moving with precision, coordinating his allies and neutralizing threats efficiently. His human instincts, combined with the techniques he had learned from the Illyrians, allowed him to outmaneuver the attackers. When the fight ended, the intruders were captured, and the palace secured. The Queen arrived shortly afterward, her expression calm but her eyes studying Ethan closely. She recognized the value of his actions, not just in combat but in judgment, strategy, and leadership. "You have acted with courage and wisdom," she said. "You have protected this palace not merely by strength but by insight and decision. Yet remember, loyalty is not granted. It is earned and demonstrated through every action, every choice, and every sacrifice." Ethan nodded, understanding the gravity of her words. He had proven his value, but he knew the palace had never felt so tense. Ethan could sense the undercurrents of unease that flowed through the hallways like an invisible river. Whispers carried in every corner. Eyes followed him even when he thought no one watched, and every footstep seemed heavier than the last. He had grown used to observation, to the Queen's scrutiny, to the subtle power struggles that defined palace life. But this feeling was different. Danger was no longer distant. It had come from within. It started with a series of small disturbances, doors left unlocked, messages intercepted, and minor sabotage of palace machinery hinted at a plot. Advisors muttered in hushed tones, blaming outside enemies, but Ethan, trained to read patterns and recognize threats, suspected something closer to home. The palace, for all its grandeur, was vulnerable from the inside. Someone among the trusted staff, or perhaps even advisors, had betrayed the Queen. One morning, a messenger arrived in haste, breathless and wide-eyed. "The inner chambers have been breached. Several guards have been incapacitated, and the princess's wing is under threat." Ethan's pulse quickened. Without waiting for orders, he sprinted toward the princess's wing, his armor clanking lightly with every step. The corridors were filled with smoke from small fires that the intruders had started, and the faint hum of damaged machinery added to the chaos. Guards struggled to regroup, but confusion slowed them. Ethan took command instinctively, directing their movements, positioning them to protect the princess, and leading the way toward the source of the threat. As he entered the wing, he saw the intruders, masked figures moving with lethal precision, armed with energy weapons that glowed ominously. They had clearly studied the palace, its defenses, and the routines of the staff. One wrong move could end in disaster. Ethan didn't hesitate. He moved with practiced precision, disarming one intruder, deflecting attacks, and guiding the guards to contain the others. Despite being outnumbered, his strategy allowed them to gain control of the situation. Every action was calculated, every decision critical. In the midst of the chaos, he found Lyria cornered in her chambers, backed against a wall, her eyes wide with fear. He sprinted toward her, intercepting an intruder's strike with a swift, precise movement that sent the attacker sprawling. Lyria's relief was palpable, but there was no time for gratitude. The battle was not yet over. Ethan moved her behind a protective barrier, directing guards to secure the exits and contain the intruders. His own armor was scorched in several places, cuts and bruises marking his body, but he pushed forward relentlessly. The intruders were skilled, but their movements were predictable under his trained observation. Step by step, room by room, he cleared the wing, ensuring the princess's safety. Finally, the last intruder was incapacitated. The wing was secure, though damaged, and the palace guards were exhausted but alive. Ethan looked at the aftermath, noting the precision of the attack and the evidence that someone within the palace had assisted. Betrayal cut deeper than the physical wounds he had sustained. The queen needed to know the truth, and he understood that uncovering it would be just as dangerous as fighting the intruders themselves. The queen arrived shortly after, her presence commanding and serene despite the chaos. She observed Ethan quietly, noting the determination, skill, and courage he had displayed. When she finally spoke, her voice was calm but carried an unmistakable weight. "You have acted with courage and wisdom," Ardessa said. "You have protected my daughter and the palace. Yet, as you know, threats often come from within as much as from without. Loyalty is tested not only by battle, but by the ability to recognize treachery and act decisively." Ethan nodded, understanding the gravity of her words. "I will do whatever is necessary to protect you and the princess. No threat, internal or external, will go unnoticed." The queen regarded him for a long moment, her eyes sharp and calculating. "You have proven yourself in combat, and your judgment is sound. But the palace is not yet safe. There are those who would exploit weakness. You must be vigilant, and you must be prepared to act even when the odds are against you." In the days that followed, Ethan worked tirelessly to uncover the source of the betrayal. He observed staff movements, listened to whispered conversations, and studied the patterns of palace routines. His human intuition, combined with the tactical training he had received from the Illyrians, allowed him to identify anomalies that others overlooked. Lyria assisted him quietly, offering insights into her world, the behavior of court members, and the subtle cues that indicated deception. Their partnership grew stronger, founded on trust, mutual respect, and a shared goal. She admired his courage, his analytical mind, and the way he acted decisively even when fear could have frozen him in place. Ethan discovered that the conspirators were a faction of advisors seeking to undermine the queen's authority. They had intended to use the princess as leverage, hoping to destabilize the palace and force political concessions. The realization made Ethan even more determined. These were not mere intruders. They were cunning, dangerous, and well-connected within the court. One evening, as the palace rested under the glow of the twin moons, Ethan prepared for the confrontation he knew was coming. He had gathered evidence, coordinated with loyal guards, and formulated a plan to expose the traitors without causing harm to the princess or innocent staff. The moment of truth was near, and he felt a mixture of anticipation and resolve. The confrontation occurred in the council chamber, a place of authority and ceremony. The conspirators had gathered, unaware that Ethan and the loyal guards had set a trap. When the meeting began, he presented the evidence calmly, outlining the movements, intercepted messages, and suspicious actions that revealed the betrayal. The conspirators reacted with shock and anger, attempting to deny their actions. But Ethan remained composed, presenting each detail with clarity and precision. The loyal guards moved to contain the traitors, and the chamber, once filled with tension and deceit, was brought under control. The queen observed silently, her expression unreadable. When the evidence was clear and the threat neutralized, she finally spoke. "You have acted with bravery, intelligence, and unwavering loyalty. You have protected my daughter, my palace, and my people. Your actions have demonstrated that humanity's courage is not a matter of size or strength, but of heart, mind, and determination." Ethan bowed his head, exhausted but proud. He had not only defended the princess from immediate danger, but had also uncovered a threat that could have destabilized the entire court. His actions had proven that humans, though few in number, could influence events in ways far beyond what others expected. The princess approached him quietly, her eyes reflecting both gratitude and admiration. "You have saved us again," she said softly. "Not only with your strength, but with your mind. I am grateful and I respect you more than I can say." Ethan nodded, acknowledging her words without seeking praise. The true reward was the safety of the palace, the queen, and the princess. Yet he felt a quiet satisfaction in knowing that his humanity, courage, and determination had been recognized, even in a world so different from his own. The queen, Ardessa, approached last, her gaze fixed on him with a mixture of appraisal and acknowledgement. "You have proven that a human can stand among the greatest of the Illyrians," she said. "Yet, as always, your place here is not a reward. It is a responsibility. You are bound to this palace, bound to protect, and bound to act when others cannot. Your loyalty and courage have earned respect, but they also carry obligation." Ethan understood completely. He had been tested in battle, in strategy, and in loyalty. He had faced internal betrayal and acted decisively to protect those in his charge. Though bound by the queen's decree, he felt a sense of purpose stronger than any freedom could provide. In the days that followed, the palace slowly returned to normal. The conspirators were held accountable, their plans dismantled, and order restored. Guards and staff moved with renewed confidence, inspired by Ethan's actions. The princess, now fully recovered, resumed her duties, though she spent more time with Ethan, learning from his insights and discussing strategies for the future. Ethan reflected on the events, realizing that bravery was not only measured in battle, but in the choices made when danger was hidden, when betrayal came from trusted sources, and when decisions carried consequences for many lives. Humanity's strength, he understood, was not in technology or sheer numbers, but in courage, intelligence, and the willingness to act for others. The queen's observation continued, but it was no longer merely scrutiny. There was recognition, acknowledgement, and a quiet respect for the human who had risked his life, bled for the princess, and proven himself capable of defending a palace, uncovering betrayal, and acting with unwavering courage. Ethan's place in the palace was still defined by obligation and vigilance, yet he no longer felt like a captive. Each day he demonstrated what humans could offer: bravery in the face of danger, insight in moments of uncertainty, and unwavering loyalty when it mattered most. As he stood in the quiet corridors, tending to minor repairs from the recent skirmish and reflecting on his actions, he realized that his journey was far from over. Challenges would continue to come, threats would arise, and the balance of power within the palace could shift at any moment. Yet he was ready. The palace was quieter now than it had been in weeks. The conspirators were detained, their plans dismantled, and the corridors no longer buzzed with whispered suspicion. Yet for Ethan, the quiet was not peace, it was a moment of anticipation. He had survived the threats, proved his courage, and protected the princess, but the queen's judgment still hovered over him. Ardessa had been silent since the events of the internal attack, observing him with the same intensity. But now it felt different. There was a weight in her gaze, a recognition that went beyond observation and into acknowledgement. Ethan spent the morning training with the palace guards, refining tactics, and improving coordination. Even with the threat neutralized, he refused to let complacency creep in. Each movement, each decision was deliberate. The palace was a living entity, its safety dependent on vigilance. Lyria watched from a balcony above, her presence calm yet supportive. She had regained full strength and now moved with confidence, but her eyes lingered on Ethan, filled with respect and something more subtle, a quiet admiration that went beyond gratitude. After training, he was summoned to the queen's chambers. The hall was vast and empty, illuminated by soft energy flowing along the walls. The queen herself stood near a window gazing outward, her posture regal. She turned as he entered, her expression unreadable. "You have acted with courage, intelligence, and unwavering loyalty," Ardessa began, her voice steady and commanding. "You have faced external threats, internal betrayal, and challenges designed to test your judgment. Each time you have proven that humans are capable of greatness, not just in strength, but in thought, courage, and principle." Ethan bowed deeply, aware of the gravity in her tone. "I have acted as I must, Your Majesty. My goal has always been the safety of the princess and the palace. That is all I seek." The queen regarded him silently for a long moment, as if weighing her final decision. Then she spoke again, her voice carrying the authority that had governed a kingdom for decades. "You are bound to this palace not as a prisoner but as a guardian. Your actions have proven that you are worthy of trust, but trust here is earned, observed, and maintained. You will continue to serve as protector, advisor, and companion to the princess. Your blood has proven your courage. Your actions now will define your legacy." Ethan straightened, understanding the implications. He was no longer a captive in the sense of confinement. His bond to the palace was one of responsibility, honor, and duty. He would remain under the queen's authority, but he was recognized as a valued and trusted ally. It was not freedom in the way humans understood it, but it was far greater. A chance to prove himself consistently and shape the future of an entire kingdom. The princess approached, her steps quiet but deliberate. "Ethan," she said softly, her eyes reflecting relief and admiration, "you have done more than save me. You have defended this palace, its people, and its honor. You have shown that humans are capable of courage that matches our own, and sometimes exceeds it." Ethan shook his head lightly. "I only acted because it was right. It is what any human would do." She smiled, but it was a smile filled with understanding rather than amusement. "Not all humans. Not all would act with such clarity and bravery. You have earned a place in this palace not by chance but by choice, courage, and heart." The queen watched them, silent but approving. Her judgment had been rendered, and it was clear that she recognized Ethan's value not only in action, but in the example he set for others. Advisors and staff who had doubted him now looked to him with quiet respect. His actions had redefined what they thought humans were capable of, and even those who had feared his influence could not deny his worth. Days passed, and the palace gradually returned to a steady rhythm. Ethan continued his duties, training, advising, and guarding, but he did so with renewed purpose. He had faced tests that would have crushed others, yet he had survived and proven himself. His role was now clear: protector of the princess, trusted by the queen, and a symbol of human courage in a world far beyond his own. Lyria spent more time with him, sharing insights, strategies, and discussions about leadership. Their conversations deepened, bridging the gap between species, culture, and experience. She asked questions not only about tactics and defense but also about ethics, human history, and the nature of courage. Ethan answered honestly, sharing lessons learned from Earth and experiences gained in the palace. They discovered that despite the vast differences between their worlds, the principles of bravery, loyalty, and wisdom were universal. One evening, Ethan found himself walking through the palace gardens with Lyria. The twin moons bathed the landscape in silver light, and the hum of energy from the palace walls created a serene background. For the first time, he allowed himself to feel a quiet sense of belonging. Though he was bound by duty, he was not a prisoner. He was part of something greater, something that valued courage, intelligence, and integrity above all else. "You have changed the way I see humans," Lyria said softly. "I always thought courage was measured by size, strength, or skill. You've shown me it is measured by heart and choice." Ethan smiled faintly. "I have only acted as I must. The world is full of challenges, and it is our choices in those moments that define us." She looked at him with admiration and something more profound, a recognition that went beyond words. "You have proven that humans can stand among the greatest of the Illyrians. You have saved lives, uncovered betrayal, and faced danger without hesitation. I respect you more than I can express." Ethan felt a quiet warmth in her words. He had not acted for recognition, yet it was satisfying to see that courage, thought, and loyalty could transcend the boundaries of species and culture. The queen observed their interaction from a distance, silent but clearly approving. Ardessa's recognition had been earned, and now it extended beyond observation to trust, respect, and acknowledgement. She had seen a human act not only with bravery but with wisdom, insight, and unwavering principle. He had become more than a protector. He had become a symbol of what humanity could bring to the galaxy. In the weeks that followed, Ethan continued to train and advise, but he also began mentoring palace guards and junior staff, sharing strategies, principles of decision-making, and lessons from his own experiences. His presence became a stabilizing force, a reminder that courage and intelligence could overcome fear, uncertainty, and even betrayal. The palace thrived under this renewed order. Staff who had once doubted him now sought his guidance. The princess, confident and healthy, took a more active role in leadership, often consulting with Ethan on matters of defense and strategy. The Queen's court, once tense and divided, found a new rhythm, influenced by the human who had entered their world and proven himself not only capable but extraordinary. One evening, as the twin moons rose high, casting silver light over the palace, Ethan reflected on his journey. He had arrived as a human from another world, bound by circumstance and the Queen's decree. He had faced impossible odds, bled for a princess, uncovered betrayal, and proven himself in ways that surpassed expectation. Yet he had done more than survive. He had earned respect, trust, and a place in a society that was alien and magnificent. The princess joined him quietly, her presence a gentle reminder of the bond they had formed. "You have changed this palace," she said softly. "Not just by your actions in battle, but by your example. You have shown that courage, integrity, and loyalty are forces that cannot be measured by species alone." Ethan nodded, feeling the truth of her words. "I have only acted as any human should. But perhaps in this world the courage of one can inspire many." The Queen appeared behind them, her gaze steady and approving. "You have acted with honor, bravery, and wisdom. Your place in this palace is no longer defined merely by my observation, but by the respect you have earned. Humans have long been underestimated. You have proven that they can stand among the greatest, not by birth but by choice, action, and heart." Ethan bowed deeply, understanding the magnitude of her words. Though he was still bound by duty, he was now recognized as a protector, a trusted advisor, and a symbol of human courage. He had entered this palace as an outsider, a stranger, and now he was part of its legacy. As he walked through the palace corridors that evening, flanked by guards and watched with quiet admiration by staff and advisors, Ethan felt a profound sense of purpose. He had saved the princess with his own blood, faced danger and betrayal, and stood firm in the face of impossible odds. Now bound not by chains but by responsibility, he had earned a place in a world far beyond his own, demonstrating what humanity could achieve when courage, intelligence, and heart guided every action. And so, Ethan's journey continued, not as a captive but as a guardian, a trusted ally, and a symbol of the strength of humans in a galaxy filled with wonder, danger, and opportunity. His story became one of legend within the palace, a testament to the enduring power of choice, bravery, and the human spirit.